The Seven Visitors of Photius Cardan. Throughout medieval times, a major current of thought distinct from official religion existed, culminating in the works of the alchemists and hermeticists. Among such groups were some of the early scientists, and men remarkable for the strength of their independent thinking and for their adventurous lives, such as Paracelsus. The nature of the mysterious beings dressed in shiny garments or covered with dark hair intrigued these men intensely. They were the first to relate these strange beings to the creatures described in the Bible and in the writings of the early Kabbalists. According to biblical writers, the heavenly hierarchy includes beings of human form called cherubim, a name that in Hebrew means full of knowledge. Ezekiel describes them in the following terms. Their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps it went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. Are the mysterious creatures who fly through the sky and land in their cloud ships, Agobar's authority notwithstanding, of the same race as the angels? Asked the old philosophers. No, because they are mortal. A book entitled Entretiens sur les sciences secrètes notes, the Hebrews used to call these beings who are between the angels and man Sadaim, and the Greeks, transposing the letters and adding but one syllable, called them daimonas. Among the ancient philosophers, these demons were held to be an aerial race, ruling over the elements, mortal, engendering, and unknown in this century to those who rarely seek truth in her ancient dwelling place, which is to say, in the Kabbalah, and in the theology of the Hebrews, who possessed the special art of holding communion with that aerial people, and of conversing with all these inhabitants of the air. Plutarch even had a complete theory on the nature of these beings, according to A. H. Clough. He thinks it absurd that there should be no mean between the two extremes of an immortal and a mortal being, that there cannot be in nature so vast a flaw, without some intermedial kind of life partaking of them both. As therefore we find the intercourse between the soul and the body to be made by the animal spirits, so between divinity and humanity there is this species of demons. It is not surprising then to find that the philosophers disagreed with Agobar on the nature of the three men and the woman who were captured by the mob in Lyon. The famous Kabbalist Zedekias, in the reign of Yorpepin, took it into his head to convince the world that the elements are inhabited by those peoples whose nature I have just described to you. The expedient of which he bethought himself was to advise the sylphs to show themselves in the air to everybody. They did so sumptuously. These beings were seen in the air in human form, sometimes in battle array, marching in good order, halting under arms, or encamped beneath magnificent tents, sometimes on wonderfully constructed aerial ships, whose flying squadrons roved at the will of the zephyrs. What happened? Do you suppose that ignorant age would so much as reason as to the nature of these marvelous spectacles? The people straightway believed that sorcerers had taken possession of the air for the purpose of raising tempests and bringing hail upon their crops. The learned theologians and jurists were soon of the same opinion as the masses. The emperor believed it as well, and this ridiculous chimera went so far that the wise Charlemagne, and after him Louis the Debonair, imposed grievous penalties upon all these supposed tyrants of the air. Now comes an account of outright contact, which I quote from the same book, Entretiens sur les sciences secrètes. The sylphs, seeing the populace, the peasants, and even the crowned heads thus alarmed against them, determined to dissipate the bad opinion people had of their innocent fleet by carrying off men from every locality and showing them their beautiful women, their republic, and their manner of government, and then setting them down again on earth in diverse parts of the world. They carried out their plan. The people who saw these men as they were descending came running from every direction, convinced beforehand that they were sorcerers who had separated from their companions in order to come and scatter poisons on the fruit and in the springs. Carried away by the frenzy with which such fancies inspired them, they hurried these innocents off to the torture. The great number of them who were put to death by fire and water throughout the kingdom is incredible. The most extraordinary case involved the abduction of 4 people and their return to earth. One day, among other instances, it chanced at Lyon that 3 men and a woman were seen descending from these aerial ships. The entire city gathered about them, crying out they were magicians and were sent by Grimaldus, Duke of Beneventum, Charlemagne's enemy, to destroy the French harvests. In vain the 4 innocents sought to vindicate themselves by saying that they were their own countryfolk, and had been carried away a short time since by miraculous men who had shown them unheard-of marvels, and had desired to give them an account of what they had seen. The frenzied populace paid no heed to their defense, and were on the point of casting them into the fire, when the worthy Agobard, Bishop of Lyon, who, having been a monk in that city, had acquired considerable authority there, came running at the noise, and having heard the accusations of the people and the defense of the accused, gravely pronounced that both one and the other were false, that it was not true that these men had fallen from the sky, and that what they said they had seen there was impossible. The people believed what their good Father Agobard said rather than their own eyes, were pacified, set at liberty the 4 ambassadors of the sylphs, and received with wonder the book which Agobard wrote to confirm the judgment which he had pronounced. Thus the testimony of these 4 witnesses was rendered vain. Such stories were so well established during the Middle Ages that the problem of communicating with the elementals became a major preoccupation of the Hermetic adepts, and an important part of their philosophy. Paracelsus wrote an entire book on the nature of these beings, but he took great pains to warn the reader of the dangers of an association with them. I do not want to say here, because of the ills which might befall those who would try it, through which compact one associates with these beings, thanks to which compact they appear to us and speak to us. And in his treatise entitled Why These Beings Appear to Us, he presented the following ingenious theory. Everything God creates manifests itself to man sooner or later. Sometimes God confronts him with the devil and the spirits in order to convince him of their existence. From the top of heaven, he also sends the angels, his servants. Thus these beings appear to us, not in order to stay among us or become allied to us, but in order for us to become able to understand them. These apparitions are scarce, to tell the truth. But why should it be otherwise? Is it not enough for one of us to see an angel, in order for all of us to believe in the other angels? Paracelsus was probably born in 1493, and only 2 years earlier Phocius Cardan had recorded his observation of 7 strange visitors directly related to the creatures of the elements, who would be so puzzling to the great philosopher. The incident is preserved in the writings of his son, Jerome Cardan, 1501 to 1576, who is well known to us today as a mathematician. Jerome Cardan lived in Milan and was not only a mathematician, but also an occultist and a physician. In his book De Subtilitate, Cardan explains that he had often heard his father tell the particular story and finally searched for his record of the event, which read as follows. August 13th, 1491. When I had completed the customary rites at about the 20th hour of the day, 7 men duly appeared to me clothed in silken garments, resembling Greek togas, and wearing, as it were, shining shoes. The undergarments beneath their glistening and ruddy breastplates seemed to be wrought of crimson, and were of extraordinary glory and beauty. Nevertheless, all were not dressed in this fashion, but only 2, who seemed to be of nobler rank than the others. The taller of them, who was of ruddy complexion, was attended by 2 companions, and the second, who was fairer and of shorter stature, by 3. Thus in all there were 7. He left no record as to whether their heads were covered. They were about 40 years of age, but they did not appear to be above 30. When asked who they were, they said that they were men composed, as it were, of air, and subject to birth and death. It was true that their lives were much longer than ours, and might even reach to 300 years' duration. Questioned on the immortality of our soul, they affirmed that nothing survives which is peculiar to the individual. When my father asked them why they did not reveal treasures to men if they knew where they were, they answered that it was forbidden by a peculiar law, under the heaviest penalties, for anyone to communicate this knowledge to men. They remained with my father for over 3 hours, but when he questioned them as to the cause of the universe, they were not agreed. The tallest of them denied that God had made the world from eternity. On the contrary, the other added that God created it from moment to moment, so that, should he desist for an instant, the world would perish. Be this fact or fable, so it stands. Nearly 3 centuries later, in September 1768, a young man of 16 was traveling to the University of Leipzig with 2 passengers from Frankfurt. It rained most of the journey, and the coach sometimes had trouble moving uphill. On one occasion, when the passengers had left their seats to walk behind the horses, the young man noticed a strange luminous object at ground level. All at once, in a ravine on the right-hand side of the way, I saw a sort of amphitheater, wonderfully illuminated. In a funnel-shaped space there were innumerable little lights gleaming, ranged step-fashion over one another, and they shone so brightly that the eye was dazzled. But what still more confused the sight was that they did not keep still, but jumped about here and there, as well downwards from above as vice versa, and in every direction. The greater part of them, however, remained stationary and beamed on. It was only with the greatest reluctance that I suffered myself to be called away from the spectacle, which I could have wished to examine more closely. Now, whether this was a pandemonium of will-o'-the-wisps or a company of luminous creatures, I will not decide. The young man in question was Goethe. You will find this sighting in the 6th book of his autobiography, according to movie director and occult scholar Kenneth Anger, to whom I am indebted for this very interesting discovery. Would the German poet and scientist have had occasion to learn more about the luminous creatures had he lived in the 20th century? If Paracelsus came back, would he find new material for his theories on the nature of the strange and fugitive races of beings from the sky? We can safely assume that their attention would be immediately attracted to the modern files of UFO landings and abduction reports. Return of the Humanoids.